Okay, let's start with an image. Picture Bagan at sunrise.
Right.
But not just any quiet sunrise, Think hundreds, maybe thousands of tourists.
Yeah, the tour bus is rolling in.
Exactly. Buses everywhere, the air just buzzing. And then you look up.
The balloons floating over the pagodas.
Those hot air balloons, drifting over this incredible landscape of ancient temples. That was Myanmar's tourism boom. Not actually that long ago.
Seems like another world now, though.
It does. Today, those same golden temples, well, they're standing in a much dimmer light. Pretty much dark, some reports say.
And that's what we're diving into today, this really dramatic collapse of Myanmar's tourism industry.
We'll be looking at the build-up, sort of the peak years, 2018, 2019, leading up towards 2025.
Yeah, using the articles and data we've got, trying to piece together what happened.
So our mission really is to understand what fueled that boom in the first place.
And then what caused it to just, vanish so quickly. It's quite the turnaround.
Definitely. So let's go back to those golden years before 2020. What did it actually feel like on the ground, the scale of it?
Oh, it was intense. You had souvenir stalls absolutely packed, hotels in Yangon, Mandalay. You often couldn't get a room.
Really? Fully booked?
Consistently, yeah. And the money coming in was huge. Foreign tourists spent something like US $2.8 billion in 2019 alone.
Wow, $2.8 billion. And the visitor numbers back that up, don't they?
They do. We saw, 3.5 million visitors in 2018?
Yeah, jumping to 4.4 million in 2019.
And the money followed from about 1.7 billion up to that 2.8 billion figure. It was booming.
So where were all these people going? What were the absolute must-sees?
Well, Bagan was definitely top of the list. You just can't beat those thousands of ancient stupas.
And the sunrises, the pictures are incredible.
Exactly. And getting that UNESCO World Heritage status in 2019, that just added to the buzz. The sunset terraces used to be packed.
Right. And what else? Inle Lake?
Inle Lake, yeah, totally unique. Those teakwood boats, the floating gardens, the fishermen rowing with their legs.
The stilt villages, too. It's a whole different way of life.
It really is very captivating for visitors.
And what about the cities? Yangon, Mandalay?
Yangon was the main gateway for most people, lots of colonial buildings, but the Shwedagon Pagoda, that golden spire, is just breathtaking.
I read it processed over 1 million arrivals way back in 2015.
That sounds right. It's always been a massive draw. And Mandalay, with its palaces up on the hill, was key too.
Plus the beaches, like Ngapali.
Ngapali Beach, yeah, for those looking for a coastal escape. It had a bit of everything.
And it sounds like they were actually building things to cope with all these visitors. Infrastructure development.
Yeah, they had to. You saw things like a modern river pier in Bagan, a whole new hotel zone planned for Mandalay, airports getting upgrades.
Trying to keep up with demand.
Exactly. There was this real optimism. People called tourism a smokeless engine for growth.
A clean industry. I saw one quote comparing Yangon Airport to a pagoda festival. Just constant activity.
That paints a picture, doesn't it? It felt like that. And the visitors were coming from everywhere.
Not just one region.
No. Lots from China and Thailand, of course, neighbors, but also big numbers from Europe, other parts of Asia, the US, quite diverse.
And they were spending money locally, buying crafts, hiring guides.
Definitely. You saw them buying lacquerware, jade, taking guided tours, staying in the nicer hotels. It was feeding into the local economy.
Okay, so you have this incredible upward curve. Everything's booming. Then what happened? What triggered the collapse?
Well, one source called it a perfect storm, really. Or disaster on two fronts, as you mentioned.
Right, 2020 to 2022, a double hit. The first, obviously, was COVID-19. How immediate was that impact?
Almost instantaneous. Lockdowns, border closures, international travel just stopped dead.
Numbers must have crashed.
Plummeted from that 4.4 million in 2019 down to maybe 900,000 in 2020, and most of those would have been early in the year.
A huge drop. And then while the world's dealing with the pandemic.
Then came the second blow. The military coup in February 2021.
How did that layer on top of the COVID crisis for tourism?
It essentially killed any chance of recovery. Martial law, conflict spreading across the country. It just wasn't safe or feasible for tourists.
So the numbers dropped even further.
No, catastrophically. By the end of 2021, estimates are around 130,000 international visitors for the whole year.
130,000. Down from over 4 million.
It's almost unimaginable, isn't it? Airlines stopped flying, visa services were suspended.
And governments started warning their citizens away.
That's right. The UK, Nepal, others issued advisories. Don't travel to Myanmar.
While neighbors like Thailand and Vietnam were trying things like vaccine tourism.
Yeah, trying to find ways to restart, Myanmar was effectively sealed off, both by the pandemic and the internal situation.
Even the officials had to admit it, right? The junta's own tourism minister confirmed the collapse.
They did. The numbers were undeniable.
So with international tourism basically gone, was there any pivot to domestic travel? Did that help at all?
There was an attempt, yes. Some internal flights resumed in 2022. But in terms of foreign tourists, the numbers stayed incredibly low.
Like how low?
Well, for the first 9 months of 2022, so January to September, it was about 233,000 international tourists.
Still a tiny fraction of the 4.36 million in 2019.
Exactly. A massive, massive drop.
We heard there were maybe trickles from China and Thailand. Did that make a difference?
The reports called those numbers paltry. Just not enough to sustain anything. We heard from a tourism official down in Mon State.
What did they say?
Said they were so reliant on foreign visitors, and without them, there was just no work. Widespread unemployment in the sector.
And the hotels in Yangon must have been empty.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Managers said occupancy was mostly like humanitarian flight crews, maybe some diplomats staying long term.
Actual tourist occupancy.
Single digits, often. Just echoing halls in these places that used to be buzzing.
Which brings us closer to now, the period leading into 2025. What's the picture? Is ghost industry too strong a term?
Sadly, no. It feels pretty accurate based on the reports. By 2024, places that were icons of the boom were eerily silent.
Like Bagan, those sunset terraces.
Deserted. One account mentioned them being filled only with crickets, quite a contrast to the crowds before.
It's hard to even picture. What are the guides saying there?
They talk about remembering the dawn to dusk frenzy, you know? Constantly busy now, they can go whole days without seeing a single foreign tourist.
Wow. And the local businesses. Souvenir sellers.
One seller said, on some days, we don't see even a single person. Friends who ran cafes nearby, their places are shuttered, just sitting idle. It's heartbreaking.
And this isn't just Bagan, is it? In Inle Lake.
Same story. That constant sound of the long-tail boats carrying tourists, gone. A BBC journalist reported being the first foreign customer a boatman had had in over 3 years.
3 years.
3 years. And those famous fishermen, still practicing their art, but mostly alone now. The audience isn't there.
And the hotel's back in Yangon. What's the situation?
Dire. By late 2021, nearly half of the city's registered hotels, almost 250 of them, had closed.
Half, including big names.
Yeah, well-known places like the Sula Shangri-La, the Savoy, basically mothballed, landmarks just sitting empty.
And the tour operators. You need them to arrange trips.
Well, downtown Yangon used to have around 3,000 tour agencies. Now, reports say maybe 7 are still operating.
From 3,000 down to 7.
It's a staggering collapse of the infrastructure that supported tourism.
And all those development plans. New piers, eco-lodges.
Mostly stalled or just forgotten about, the momentum is completely gone.
Did the small bump in domestic travel help fill the gap at all? We heard about some visitors from Thailand and China in 2023.
It helped a little, maybe. But even then, in August 2023, Yangon hotel occupancy was only about a third full. In 2019, it was over half full, so still way down.
And some places are just off limits now, like Nugapali Beach.
Tragically, yes. Fighting nearby, the airport got displaced. You just can't get there safely, or perhaps at all.
And it's not the only one.
No. Worryingly, many of the, top 30 tourist sites from the boom years are now considered unsafe by various groups or governments.
Which really drives home the human cost, doesn't it? What does this mean for the ordinary people who relied on tourism?
It means severe difficulties. Think about the horse cart drivers in Bagan, the people making lacquerware, even the monastery caretakers who relied on donations.
Their income streams just dried up.
Completely. On Inle Lake, the boatmen are struggling just to feed their families.
We saw a quote from a hotel manager in Malamine.
Yeah, summing it up brutally. Tourist days are almost non-existent. Many hotels remain closed, and those still operating are barely breaking even.
Even when there are occasional surges in domestic travel, like around holidays, Kaitio Rock, the Golden Rock.
The numbers just aren't comparable. Like April 2022 saw maybe 6,000 domestic visitors there. Sounds okay until you hear that in 2017, the same period, saw 170,000 people.
Wow, so it's nowhere near enough to replace the foreign spending.
Not even close. And the latest figures, looking at early 2025, still show annual visitors in the low hundreds of thousands, mostly regional. Just a tiny fraction of the peak.
It's the silence that seems to strike people who remember the boom.
It is. That Bagan souvenir seller mentioned how people, even locals, rarely travel and buy from us now. There's just less money, less movement.
And the Inle boatman talking about losing freedom.
Yeah, the freedom that came with having work, with interacting with the outside world, it's a profound loss.
Even the balloons in Bagan are grounded.
Apparently so. Without the tourists to pay for flights, the operators had to suspend them. Another visible symbol gone.
So those iconic scenes, the temples lit up, the busy markets, they're just memories now, or old photos.
Pretty much. By late 2024, everyone seemed resigned to the fact that rebuilding the sector would take a very, very long time, if it's even possible under current conditions.
Is there any government strategy focusing on specific countries?
There's talk of attracting Chinese and Russian visitors, but tourism experts point out they often have different travel patterns, maybe spend less locally, stick closer to Yangon.
And domestic travel, while up slightly, can't fill the economic hole left by international tourists.
No, the spending power just isn't the same. The main sentiment you hear is just waiting for stability.
It's such a stark contrast. Tour buses and crowds versus a lone monk, maybe an aid worker.
That's often the reality now in places that were teeming just a few years ago.
There was that Yangon hotelier who sounded hopeful, but realistic.
Yeah, saying something like, we've made very little to no profit, but we don't want to give up yet because a hotel can contribute a lot to the community.
That really shows how fragile it all was, perhaps, how much was riding on it.
Definitely. And just to recap the numbers again, millions of visitors down to hundreds of thousands. Billions in revenue down to, well, maybe tens of millions. It's a massive economic shock.
A huge void for a country that really pinned a lot of hope on tourism, for jobs, for connection to the world.
Those memories of the boom, sold-out hotels, temples echoing with different languages, they must feel incredibly distant now.
Yeah, and Myanmar's golden temples, for now at least, stand quiet. A real testament to how quickly fortunes can change.
Absolutely.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, the key takeaway is pretty clear, isn't it?
Yeah, it's this devastating 1-2 punch. The global pandemic hitting, followed almost immediately by deep political instability and conflict. Together, they caused a near-total collapse of a once vibrant industry.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a final thought, perhaps.
Right. When you see something like this happen, this sudden vanishing act of an entire economic sector built on global movement, what does it tell us?
What does it reveal about the vulnerabilities in our interconnected world, especially for economies heavily reliant on tourism?
How resilient are these industries, really? Or are they perhaps more fragile than we realize, built on assumptions of stability and mobility that can disappear almost overnight? Something to think about.